All right, what is going on, guys? Brian and I here for Rewind number 25, and for this week's edition, we're going to be covering WWE's Judgment Day 2007 pay-per-view event. Before we get into the show, I'd like to take the time and run through some quick reminders, as well as go through the upcoming lineup of programming to expect from us in the near future. First, last weekend was the WWE's 2020 Money in the Bank pay-per-view, so for that we did the Rewind number 24, which was Money in the Bank 2011. And we did our 2020 Money in the Bank review and recap as well. So if you have not yet, be sure to check out both shows. We had a great time putting together that rewind, and it was really awesome having Josh join us for that one as well. Then we followed up with the review for our Monday morning show. So a great 2 days of content from JNT Radio. Speaking of JNT Radio, if you have not yet, follow us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at JNC_radio. Like our official Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also have a Twitch account, which we haven't done anything with yet, but sometime down the road, we'd like to do some fun stuff off of there. I've always wanted to try to do a live reaction show where simultaneously we watch an event of some kind, and each of us give our thoughts on it while it's going on and while we're watching it. I don't know how we'd put that together, but on paper that sounds like a really fun concept. Maybe something that would be easier to do once quarantine is over. I'm not quite sure, but that sounds like a hell of an idea.
Yeah.
Also, follow us on Spotify if you have an account on there, and if you are an Apple user, be sure to subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts. We're available on all platforms, but I mentioned the following two in particular because that's where I recently discovered that our main audience comes from, those two services being Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But if you like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, that's where you get your podcasts from. Be sure to follow us and subscribe on there. And of course, if you have iHeartRadio, Google Play, wherever you get them from, of course, just follow us on there. We're on all of them, so be sure to check us out on there. And of course, this is Rewind number 25. But looking forward to the rest of the month. We have next week, Sunday, May 24th. That's when the show will be out, but the pay-per-view itself is Saturday, May 23rd. We have our All Elite Wrestling AEW Double or Nothing 2020 review and recap coming. Double or Nothing this year features the Elite versus the Inner Circle in a Stadium Stampede match. Jon Moxley versus Brody Lee for the AEW World Title. And Cody versus Lance Archer to crown the first ever TNT champion. That all, of course, as I said, takes place this upcoming Saturday night, May 23rd. So we're going to flip the order of things by bringing you the pay-per-view review on Sunday and give you the rewind on Monday instead. And for that rewind, we have Rewind number 26 coming your way with WWE Judgment Day 2008. That card features JBL versus John Cena, Chris Jericho versus Shawn Michaels, Edge versus Undertaker for the vacant World Heavyweight Championship, and Triple H versus Randy Orton for the WWE title inside a steel cage. That show will be available on Monday, May 25th. And then for the final rewind of the month, we're going to be technically doing a June show, but it's going to come a day earlier on May 31st, but June 1st was 12 years ago to the day when it actually had happened. And for that, we're going to be doing WWE One Night Stand 2008, featuring Batista versus John Cena in a stretcher match, John Cena versus JBL in a First Blood match, Triple H versus Randy Orton in the Last Man Standing match for the WWE Championship, and in the main event, we have Undertaker versus Edge for the World Heavyweight title in a tables, ladders, and chairs match. So all of that will be coming your way for the remainder of the month, and then coming up on Wednesday, May 27th, part one of our summer lineup for the month of June will be announced via our social media pages, so be sure to follow those on those platforms, being that they are the best way to find out details and everything JNC Radio related. Before we get into the actual show itself, like always, for every rewind, let's give some backstory as to how this event shaped. So now into the backstory here. 2007 for some as a whole can often be remembered as, for some or even many, as a dark time for the WWE and the wrestling world even as a whole. Not much in terms of the product. It wasn't the best it had ever been, but it also was far from the worst as well. Particularly one occurrence that had taken place a month later from this time period here that would have a negative effect on the way people would perceive this year, with that being the Chris Benoit family tragedy. A tragic event that even to this day I have a hard time wrapping my head around and have a difficulty time trying to even really just talk about on this program. It We won't go into full detail on it here, but I'm pretty sure everyone listening is probably familiar with it, obviously. Or better yet, if you want to hear about it, I'd recommend checking out the first episode, or actually the first and second episode, because it's like a two-parter.
Of the Dark Side of the Ring
yeah,
they did on Chris Benoit.
For season 2, yeah. Where it's basically the whole situation is documented and is discussed by the people closest to the incident and Benoit himself. But getting back to Judgment Day, this show was interesting in the sense that there was not really much build heading into it, with the exception, I guess, of maybe one or two matches. So honestly, we're not even going to spend a lot of time giving a lot of backstory to this, but starting with the main program on Raw at the time, it featured WWE Champion John Cena and the Great Khali.
Yeah, that slobber knocker.
The feud began on the April 30th edition of Monday Night Raw. Throughout the night, it would be discovered that both Edge and Randy Orton had been laid out backstage. By whom they were attacked by was unknown, at least at that point. Then while Cena and Michaels were facing off in a non-title match, Khali would attack Michaels from behind and deliver the Khali bomb to Cena. Then the following week on Raw, the Great Khali would face Shawn Michaels in a number one contenders match to face John Cena for the WWE Championship, which Khali would win by knockout. Then Khali the same night would steal John Cena's title belt. And that's so there you go right there. I basically have all the details for that.
And in the process, rob us of a Shawn Michaels versus John Cena match.
Well, I guess they had already done it a couple times, but
yeah, that's true, I guess. But I'd rather see that for the 500th time than see Great Khali and John Cena.
I would agree. I would agree. For the SmackDown brand, the top program at this point was between the new World Heavyweight Champ at the time, Edge, who was just moved over to the show, and Batista. This would begin to shape back on the May 7th edition of Raw, where Edge would defeat Mr. Kennedy to win possession of the Money in the Bank briefcase and contract. Then later that week on the May 11th, 2007 SmackDown, there would be a steel cage main event between the World Heavyweight Champion at that point, Undertaker, and Batista. That match would end with both men's feet hitting the ground simultaneously, resulting in the contest being ruled as a draw. Then after the match, Undertaker would then be assaulted by Mark Henry, who was making his return at the time. Henry would lay him out in the ring, and while he'd make his way back up the entranceway, Edge's music would hit, and out came the new Mr. Money in the Bank. He'd cash in the briefcase for the title opportunity of his choosing anytime, any place, anywhere, and he'd pin The Undertaker to win the World Heavyweight title. Then the next week on SmackDown, May 18th, the May 18th episode, the go-home show to Judgment Day, Batista would challenge Edge for the World Heavyweight title, and the match would be on. For ECW, we had quite the interesting program over on that show. The continuation of the McMahon-Lashley rivalry. Do-rag Vince. Of course, at WrestleMania 23, a show in which, if you haven't heard already, we did a rewind for back in early April for our big Mania week. If you have not already given that a listen, do so now. Cheap plug number one right there. At WrestleMania 23, Bobby Lashley, the ECW World Champion at the time, would represent Donald Trump in the Battle of the Billionaires hair versus hair match against Umaga, who is representing Vince. Lashley would pick up the win, which would mean that Vince would have his head shaved bald, which Trump and Lashley both took part in doing. Vince, following the humiliation, would set his sight on Lashley, and with the help of Shane McMahon, his son, and Umaga, they would all look to make his life a living hell. That is Bobby Lashley's. At the previous pay-per-view event, Backlash, Bobby Lashley would be forced to face Vince, Shane, and Umaga in a 3-on-1 handicap match for the ECW World title, with the McMahons and Umaga winning the match. But the catch, however, is that Vince would get the pinfall on Lashley, which means that Vince McMahon would become the new ECW champion. Following this, Lashley would demand a rematch for his ECW title, which he would receive on this show here, Judgment Day 2007. But once again, he'd have to face Vince, Shane, and Umaga in a 3-on-1 handicap match. So that's the backstory to this whole show here. The course.
To this well-booked master feud.
This well-booked master feud.
That, captivated audiences.
And those are like the three main programs here, and it's like they're all like world title programs, I guess, because the ECW title was supposed to be a world title. I mean, there were times where probably the Intercontinental title was more prestigious, if we're being completely honest.
They tried to push Khali and get him to the top multiple times.
Oh yeah, and this will not be the last time this year, because later on we'll see him as World Heavyweight Champion as well.
And he'll beat the Undertaker.
Yeah, he beat the Undertaker in his first match, which was at Judgment Day 2006, the year before.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He beat the Undertaker like he was getting pushed.
Oh yeah,
and it was. I wonder what the last straw for them was when they were like, you know what, we just can't.
Yeah, because I wonder as well. Actually,
was it Vinnie Mac just being done with him?
That could very well. Well, yeah, it probably was the case after a while. Of course, they kept him around many years after the fact, but he wasn't as big of a deal.
He was like, kind of like an ambassador to India for them, and like he was.
Oh yeah, I mean they did the Punjabi Playboy gimmick, which I'm pretty sure we'll talk about one day. But of course, this is Rewind number 25. This is Judgment Day 2007. This is done by World Wrestling Entertainment on May 20th, 2007. So this show, of course, this will be on May 17th when you guys get it. But May 20th is coming up, so figured it'd be a good time to, I guess, do this one. This is from the Scott Trade Center in St. Louis, Missouri, in front of 10,500 being the recorded attendance figure. And the buy rate would be 242,000, which is 10,000 buys down from the previous year. It's not a big drop, nothing like worth being concerned about.
No.
But I guess what's interesting here is this is early in the stage where they started doing the tri-branded pay-per-views, where they'd have Raw, SmackDown, and ECW all in there. Because originally, before, they were doing like individual brand pay-per-views. You know, Raw would have Backlash, SmackDown would have Judgment Day. You know, in that cycle. So it's interesting here that
ECW would have jack shit.
Yeah, they'd have December to December. Thank God that show's already done, so we don't have to do that again. But
yeah, that was awful.
But yeah, so it'd be just 10,000 buys down, so down from the previous year. So like not like a serious drop, or like it's not like 100,000 buys that are down or anything. But it's just interesting that I guess a SmackDown pay-per-view. I mean, it was only 10,000 more buys, but I guess it's just interesting that like the same pay-per-view the year before, with just the SmackDown brand itself, like basically did like the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where you had by doing this, it'd have all the stars in there at once, and it didn't really like make a difference. But of course, the brands representing this would be Raw, SmackDown, ECW, as previously noted. The commentators would be Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler for Raw, which is that really a lot of the case when we do these. Michael Cole and John Bradshaw, Layfield, JBL for SmackDown, and Joey Styles and Taz for ECW. And the theme song is "I Don't Want to Stop" by Ozzy Osbourne. So we'd open up with the video package, which would primarily, just highlight the three main programs, which we had discussed in the backstory. There'd actually be a dark match, which obviously nobody would see, but it'd be Kane versus William Regal, which Kane would pick up the win. It's interesting, though, that Kane's actually on the promotional poster for this, and he wasn't actually part of the main card.
Yeah, that was really weird. I didn't get that at all.
Yeah, because I've seen there's been times where there's been promotional posters and the guy who was like on it wasn't actually on the show. Maybe sometimes that's because they were supposed to be on there to begin with and they got injured.
They got hurt.
Yeah, but the fact that he was around at this time and like he wasn't even on there. I mean, they weren't gonna put Kane and William Regal like on the actual card, just like that. But it's just kind of weird. So I just thought I'd point that out. So in the opening contest, we'd have a singles match. It'd be Ric Flair versus Carlito. Solid matchup. I think it was the right way to open the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, it's Ric Flair. At this point in Ric's career, you can put him out there. He'll give you an easy, safe match that's an average match.
Yeah, even at this point.
Even at this point. The other thing that was weird to me is that Flair went over.
Yeah, which I was going to get into, of course. Or we were going to get into, but the whole deal with Flair and Carlito here, I guess, would begin actually over Flair thinking that Carlito was lazy.
Yeah, didn't I say that? We were watching the pay-per-view?
Yeah, you said that, but I didn't quite remember it. So I went and looked into it. I'm like, yeah, that's how this started.
And didn't it start because that was the rumor about him backstage? And that was the opinion of him, and they put him in a feud with Flair because of it?
Well, originally they were a pairing. I remember that. Like they're like a
Okay, so
team,
I
and like
probably just made that
Ric Flair was like his protege. But no, I would not be surprised if that was the case. If that's what they like, if they made like a storyline out of like reports or something like that.
Mhm.
In this
But
case,
anyway, it